Welcome back. It is day 46 of the shutdown of the Department of Homeland Security, with no end in sight as both the House and Senate remain on recess. Members of Congress all headed home last week after a potential deal to end the funding lapse fell apart. Yesterday, White House press secretary said the president was calling on Congress to come back to Washington to hash out a deal. It comes as TSA officers began receiving paychecks after weeks of working without pay. DHS reported call-outs have dropped 30%, with some airports seeing some relief from long security lines. Joining me now is Utah Republican Congressman Mike Kennedy. Congressman, thank you so much for joining us. I want to start with this. Last time you were on this program, you told my colleague Kristen Welker that, quote, shutdowns are a disaster. So do you think the House missed an opportunity on Friday to be the ones to end the shutdown by voting on that unanimous bill, or by not voting on that unanimous bill that passed the Senate?
Shutdowns are total nonsense. They were nonsense when Democrats years ago, when Republicans years ago did them, and they're nonsense now when Democrats are doing them. We had a bipartisan, bicameral bill more than 40 days ago that was ready to be passed, and then these murders had happened in Minnesota happened, and all of a sudden the Democrats ran away and started using the shutdown as a political weapon. And frankly, I think the Democrats should be embarrassed that they're using government workers as leverage for their own political ploys. And I find it totally unacceptable. That's why I've sponsored the No Work, No Pay Act. If you're in Congress and there's a shutdown, you don't get paid, Congressman, as well as these federal workers. And I also, No Shutdowns Act. It's the sort of thing that we should sponsor and promote the bill that if there is a shutdown, that we have a continuing resolution automatically in play for 2 weeks. And if after the 2 weeks we don't have a resolution to the conflict and we have another continuing resolution ad infinitum until we move ahead on these negotiations. I'll just say that what the Senate sent to us was also unacceptable. They zeroed out the budget of Border Patrol and ICE. That zeroing out of the budget, not only would it not pay the people that need to be paid, it would also threaten child sex trafficking investigations that Border Patrol is already doing. So we cannot accept that. And when the Speaker came to us as a conference, said this is what we've got, the zeroing out of the budget for ICE and Border Patrol, we all agreed as a conference, we're not going to accept that. We sent them back a 60-day continuing resolution, which is all it is keeping the funding as it currently stands. We sent it back to the Senate. The Senate is all home, and we see some on vacation doing various things, yeah, the Senate should come back. The ball's in their court, and they should come back and fund that continuing resolution while we continue these negotiations.
But, Congressman, even though that bill did exclude ICE and Border Patrol, they do have funding at this moment because it was included in the big, beautiful bill that Republicans passed last summer. And the Senate plan would have funded the rest of the department.
Not for the whole thing. I've heard that.
But you don't think that would be enough?
It would not have. Actually, the zeroing out of that budget, there's an estimated 50 or 60% of the budget for Border Patrol and ICE that would not be funded. That's the ancillary workers. Of course, there's a lot of people that are answering phones that are the schedulers, whatever supportive services that are there. Those people are not funded in the big, beautiful bill. And as a result, they would not be funded. The other idea that's really important to consider is that we can't have the Senate picking and choosing parts of an appropriations package that they're going to line item veto out. That sets a terrible precedence. And if we're going to do that out of the 12 appropriations packages, we will never get any bill passed. We'll never get any appropriations package passed if they're going to cut out parts and we're just going to go back forever just negotiating and fighting about these various parts. So the appropriations packages always have to start in the House. House has sent 11 out of 12 and 12 out of 12 over there. And the senators on the Democrat side, they need to support the appropriations package that they agreed to over a month ago, and then we can get these people paid and continue the vital work that they do.
Now, there has been some talk of using a reconciliation bill, which would require only 51 votes in the Senate to pass things in order to fund perhaps all of DHS, which would be outside the normal appropriations process, as you mentioned. But is that something you could support, despite it being outside the appropriations process? And also, do you think there is enough support for Republicans to unify around a reconciliation package?
Time is of the essence. As to a reconciliation package, I am supportive of a reconciliation package 2.0. I think that could be something that's helpful, but that takes time. It takes a lot of time. You have to pass a budget resolution, and you have to have the negotiations. So we don't have time. Right now, there are people that were emergency order from the president. We're funding their salaries, and it makes me very concerned when we're talking about delaying that more. The ball's in the Senate's court right now. they could fund a continuing resolution, which just keeps things as usual, moving forward for 60 days, and these people could be paid. These families deserve their paycheck. We've had hundreds that have quit as a result of this nonsensical shutdown, and we need to support these people for the vital work that they do, not just in TSA, but our Border Patrol and our ICE agents are doing great work, and we need to support them by making sure they get their salaries.
I do think it's worth noting that Senate Republicans could have also rejected that deal. They allowed it to pass by voice vote on Thursday. But I do want to turn to the Iran war. We've seen 5,000 additional troops head to the region.
I want to point out it was at 3 o'clock in the morning.
But it was hotlined, which means they checked at 9
I'm sorry,
p.m.
I missed that question. Go ahead. What was that?
They checked with every office through a hotline before they went to that final vote at 3 in the morning. So they had an opportunity. They knew this was coming. If Republicans really wanted to stop it, they could have. Well, but might want to take it up with Senate Republicans.
I haven't talked to my Republican senators.
While I have you, I do want to talk about the war in Iran.
I think to unanimous consent at 3 in the morning is not appropriate.
On the topic of boots on the, fair enough. On the topic of war in Iran, would you support the president putting boots on the ground?
No, I'm not.
I don't want our young men and young women fighting on foreign soil, putting their lives in jeopardy. And I believe that this can be resolved without us having soldiers on the ground. I think Iran, for more than 40 years, has been a terrorist nation that chants death to America. And just like I think about professionally a doctor cutting out cancer, if there's cancer in the body politic of the world, we need to cut that out. When you're in the middle of an operation to cut out cancer, you can't cut and run and hope that things go well and not have it all the cancer entirely taken out. So in this case, I believe we need to complete the operation to the best of our ability so we can be assured that the nuclear weapons that Iran is trying to develop, as well as the ballistic missiles that can reach over 1,000 miles to nations far outside of the range that we thought of before, that we make sure that those ballistic missiles that would deliver those nuclear weapons are not available to a terrorist nation who wants to destroy not only America, but Israel. And I stand with President Trump in moving forward on this operation. But I do not want our soldiers, our young men and our young women, the greatest resource we have in this country is our young people. And for us to send them into harm's way, I believe and I know that President Trump loves those people, and he will only do that as absolutely necessary.
As the war unfolds, the average cost of a gallon of gas have surpassed $4 nationwide. It's closer to $4.20 actually in Utah, your home state. The White House said prices will come down when the war is over, but do you think that's enough for Americans who are already facing high prices now and being asked to sacrifice?
I want to make sure that those prices are down also as fast as possible. And this is the sort of thing that as we invest in making sure that that terrorist nation is not holding the world's oil a hostage, 20% of the world's oil flows through the Strait of Hormuz. And we need to make sure that that terrorist nation is not jacking up the prices associated with gas. So, yes, I am concerned. My constituents are concerned about gas prices. I believe this is a temporary, painful yet temporary state of circumstances. And just like I mentioned with the surgery, nobody wants to get surgery. It hurts when it happens, but weeks and months later, people feel better because we've done the thing that was necessary. And I believe that's how President Trump's proceeding. And I think we should support him as we move forward with this operation.
Congressman Mike Kennedy of Utah, thank you so much for joining us.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.